All right, and we are live, and so we have a ton, and I mean a ton, to cover tonight. And I just need to close a couple things that ended up open. So we're going to cover quite a lot tonight, and the big main headliner topic is, boy, oh boy, the knives are out for Joseph Biden. My goodness, I did not think that there was any world in which I could actually feel sorry for that guy. But these past couple of weeks have made me feel a bit of pity, because say what you want about this guy, he looks like he's on his last legs, and it is it's quite sad to see a president of the United States, or really an elderly person, regardless of their job, to be sort of put through the ringer the way it has happened for Biden this week. And again, I have no love lost for this guy. I'm fully aware of his evil, and the magnitude of the betrayal that he's having at the hands of his fellow Molochians is such that I can't help but feel a bit of compassion towards him, despite the fact that I'm well aware of all the evil that this man has committed, both in the past, on a personal level, and of course in terms of his administration. So yeah, the knives are out for Biden. We got Clooney, Obama, and many other Dem globalist operatives suddenly turning on him. And so we are going to be talking about that and so much more. But I'm just going to real quick talk about the fact that I am still offering the registration will close on the 17th of this month, which is next, I think, Wednesday, for both the Angelic Magic and Vedic Astrology, Introduction to Vedic Astrology courses. And I am offering, for the first time ever publicly, a sliding scale option for folks. So if you're interested in either of those, having the incredible transformative effect, the dissolving of self-limiting beliefs, the healing of trauma, the integrating of shadow, and the stepping in to divine masculine or divine feminine, in the case of the Angelic Magic class, and the ability to chart and understand your own karma and that of those in your family, so you can have real clear guidance on what your dharma or life purpose is, in the case of the Introduction to Vedic Astrology course. You can find both of those on whitelotusoflight.com under courses. And so also, we're going to have Patreon second half for rather members only, Patreon members only second half. And that's going to include an angelic prophecy from the virtues that came through today that was pretty special. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right into it. So it's pretty wild that here we are with this August 4th deadline looming for the Democrats of who's going to be on the ballot in Ohio, right? Because whoever is registered as the Democratic candidate on August 4th will be the only Democratic candidate eligible for the Electoral College votes that come from Ohio, which I don't have on hand the number, but it's pretty substantial. And Ohio is one of those purple or swing states. And so if the Dems don't have that, it is a bit, I think, bluer rather than redder over the past couple of elections. But if the Democrats don't win that, they're really screwed. And so they have to have their final candidate decided by August 4th, which is a tremendous amount of pressure on them. I'm here for it. I saw Meow had, I thought that was a bag of popcorn, but it was a cute little a cat coming out of a box. I saw that as a bag of popcorn, and I'm like, exactly, get out your popcorn bags, because this is going to be a fun one. And so it's really interesting because I'm going to go ahead and do a little screen share here. It looks to me like, oops, let me pull up the right one. It looks to me like we have, I got to close it again. Sorry, the screen share thing is a little bit tricky at times. I'm of the personal belief that Obama has been really running the White House ever since Biden got in. He gave that infamous interview either right before or right after the election, where he talked about how he wanted to have a third term, which of course is now constitutionally illegal, because good old FDR said, screw convention, screw tradition, I'm going to go for 4 terms. And then he died in office in his 4th term. And so after that, they passed an actual amendment to the Constitution, one of the last amendments to the Constitution to be passed, that limited the presidency to 2 terms. But Obama stated he sure would like to have a 3rd term where he speaks through a microphone into a mouthpiece in the ear of a man or woman who could basically be his 3rd term, but he could just be at home in his tracksuit. And he said, I'd love to do it. And that just shows that guy is completely addicted to power, right? Because he doesn't even care about any of the glory or any of the inducements one might have being the actual president. He just wanted the power. And so now, according to this article on Zero Hedge, there's people in the Biden camp who think that Obama is behind the scenes being the main force that is pulling for Biden to drop out of the race. And that would lead me to believe, if this is true, that the Biden campaign and many Democratic officials do believe that Barack Obama is quietly working behind the scenes to orchestrate this, according to Joe Sellout Scarborough, who, by the way, as Trump likes to point out, had a very odd thing where one of his aides died when he was a Florida congressperson, a very strange turn of events where she died either in his office or in his campaign office, something like that. A very strange circumstance, and Trump kind of alluded to that there was something suspicious about it, right? And ever since then, Scarborough, since retiring from politics, has been a nice partisan hack there on MSNBC, right? And his co-host, Mika Brzezinski, daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski, right? It's just amazing to me how all these massive geopolitical operatives, are mouthpieces for the same, or even outright now intelligence officials like former intelligence officials like Clapper and the drone king John Brennan are just openly part of the media. It's quite wild. But if you watch, it's that whole Molochian hive mind where all of a sudden the Titanic just turns, right? Like for months it was, Biden's fine. There's no problems with his cognitive. There's no problems with his cognitive function. There's no decline. Oh, the Republicans are doing deep fakes of him freezing at the fundraiser. And now George Clooners, as they call him on BoJack Horseman, and I like that better because it's more insulting than George Clooney, who's another Molochian scumbag who just repeats the Molochian hive mind information, says, I realized during that fundraiser that Biden was just checked out. He's not the same Biden of 2010, let alone 2020, 2020, let alone 2010. He's completely declined. And there was a hilarious piece by the Babylon Bee where they said, George Clooney leading the charge in Ocean's 14, where there's a heist of $30 million by trotting out a senile candidate that he knows can't run for office, which I thought was probably the best commentary about this entire situation. And of course, they want to do it because they want to replace Biden with a ringer. And, Vivek Ramaswamy and other Republicans have been saying for months and months and months that this was clearly the case. And it was obvious to any sober observer that Biden was not fit for office and that they were going to have to replace him. So why now? Well, a couple of things. One, they wanted to make sure that there was no democratic process or will of the people by having a primary. And two, they wanted to wait to make it as, kind of last minute as possible. So that way the Republicans and the Luciferians, if you want to put it in those terms, didn't have time to do as much opposition research and dig up as much dirt. Of course, the Luciferians have already long since figured out that the short list is Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, and Hillary Clinton. I don't know which of the three of those is the worst. Probably Hillary Clinton, but gosh, it's close, right? It's pretty horrifying. But you really see the Molochian hive mind just trotting it out now, how clearly the knives are out for Biden now, that they have just decided that's it. We're not running with Biden. We got to replace him. We need to replace him before that August 4th Ohio Electoral College deadline. And they're just done with them. And it's really brutal the way they're taking him down. They're clearly not giving him the stimmies that he was given. And it seems like his earpiece isn't working so good nowadays. So Something more on a dark note before I get to some really positives here is I'm going to do a little slideshow here about how, and this comes up in the angelic prophecy, that the Molochians are winning some what seem like really big victories right now in the EU, but they're actually hollow. And the channeling I did from the virtues today, I couldn't figure out why the Luciferians had won in Holland, but then let the UK and France, which both seem more important on the surface, go to the Molochians. I was very puzzled by that piece of the Shadow War. And if you're new to the channel, you don't understand these terms, Luciferians, Molochians, go ahead and go watch Shadow Wars episode 1, and then come back and you can watch all these live streams. And I think you'll be quite interested. And a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about how some of the angelic prophecies have already come true, and what exactly some of these things mean. And then in the second half, for Patreon members, there's going to be actually a new prophecy. I wasn't expecting another one so quickly, but the virtues came to me during my Seraphim ritual this week and said they wanted to deliver something again. So the Molochians appear to win in France and the UK, and they did it with nonsense parliamentary rules and shenanigans. And it looks like the Luciferians are using the rope-a-dope technique after big wins in Argentina, Holland, and Panama this year. And so what's going on here? And so just a second, I got to see it. Oh, did I somehow close my slideshow? That would be classic Ian. Oh, yes. Classic Ian. Oh, wait. Nope. There it is. Ha-ha. So I can share this. So I just want to do a little slideshow share here just to kind of go through the insanity of these results that just happened in the EU. So we're going to real quick do this. Give me just a moment. Nope, not that one. Darn it. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. So let's see. Present slides. Google Slides. Add Google Slides. Add it from the correct email this time, Ian. You got this. You can do this. It is very possible to achieve this goal. You're there, buddy. You got to check. Quick. We got it. And it's processing. So give me just a second. Oh, boy. There we go. All right. So let's make this full screen here. So we had these candidates in the pivotal French election. So in the first round, Marine Le Pen, who is part of this, I don't really care for her, the Le Pen family, but they're part of this nationalist gambit that the Luciferian consciousness is using to take over from the Molochian consciousness. And in the first round, Le Pen's Front National or National Front or whatever it's called, because they've changed it a few times, they crushed, but they didn't get decisive victories. And the way it works in the French parliamentary system is if you don't get a decisive victory, you have to have a clear majority. Then it goes to a runoff between the top 3 or 4 candidates. And so they have about 575 or so seats in the French parliament, and more than 200 candidates, mostly from left and centrist parties, dropped out in order to get people who would vote for them to vote for either the centrist or this, more often, this far left party that ended up getting the slight majority. And they cynically dropped or strategically dropped out in a tactical move to block the far right. And what did that look like? Well, what that looked like is the national rally and the Union of the Far Right had a staggering 10.6 million votes, right? But then they only ended up with 38 seats. And then in the second round, they got 10 million votes, and they got 104 seats, right? They're this alliance of the so-called far right, which is just people who don't like weaponized immigration, if you really boil it down. And they got 104 seats with 10 million votes. This new Popular Front, which is basically communist, like extreme far left, they got 3 million less votes. And magically, they got 44% more parliamentary seats. And the Ensemble pour la République, which is either the centrist or left party, I believe that's Macron's party, they got a mere 6 million votes, and yet they got 53% more seats than the National Rally, which is the Le Pen party. And then the Republicans, which is a much smaller group, they got 2 million votes, 1/5 the size, and they got about 40% of the vote. So even they got proportionally more than Le Pen's party, who their big thing is against this weaponized immigration. So if you look at it, it's insane. They got 26.8% of the votes, and they got 177 seats, the Communist Party, right? So they got 177 seats despite only getting 26% of the votes. Macron and his allies got only 22% of the vote and got 148 seats. And the National Rally and their allies got 37.4% of the vote. And yet they got less seats than either of these two parties that they beat in some cases by like 150% of the vote. Yeah, because that's real. You really saved democracy over there in France. Democracy, right? Sacre bleu. Ridiculous. Like, what a bunch of trash. This is why the parliamentary... I used to think the U.S., when I was younger, had the worst governmental system on earth. As an adult who is aware of how international politics work, I realized that literally the only upside, and it's also a downside, that parliamentary systems have is the vote of no confidence in the dissolving of governments and snap elections. So you don't have to wait the entire term if someone's really shitting the bed, right? That's literally the only upside. Everything else about it is just pure shenanigans. Look at what's happening up there in Canada with that one Sikh guy is like holding down this 7 or 8%, and yet always is what is able to give Trudeau the prime ministership. Parliamentary systems are garbage. The U.S. system is not good, but it's actually vastly superior, which is to think about, because the U.S. system is pretty far from, pure as the driven snow. It's pretty corrupt, but parliamentary systems, as you can see here, are much, much worse. So then what's been happening, though, which is a bit heartening, is that French women voters have suddenly had enough. They've had enough of the incredible, and they try and, frame it here. Oh, it's traditional boogeyman immigration. Well, when a tiny percent of the population is causing a massive amount of the violent crime, and especially the assaults on women, of which, as is the case everywhere around the world, many happen for every one that's actually reported. And I've known people who have been talking to me about this, even when I thought they were racist because of my, lefty conditioning back then. I've known about this stuff has been happening literally for 20 years. I was in the EU in 2004 when this weaponized immigration was first happening. And I was hearing about this thing where women were being assaulted by people who are coming from other countries who view especially non-Muslim women as basically prostitutes or not kind of real women, and that you can kind of treat them as though they're prostitutes, up to and including raping them, and that's just A-okay and fine culturally. And of course, that has been happening, and it's been happening for 20 plus years in France. And the women in France have finally wised up to the tune of, in 2019, 25% of men and 21% of women voted for National Rally. This is that supposed far-right party, which just basically is like, can we cut down on the whole rape thing and this weaponized immigration that's destroying the culture of France? Which, by the way, side note, if this was happening in reverse, right? If it was white men were moving en masse to the Middle East and North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa and raping black women, as happened under colonialism, it would be rightly decried as horrible, right? Because the people of those cultures had lived there for centuries, or in some case, 100,000 years, thousands of years, clearly in a lot of cases. In the case of Europe, people who are, genetically white, for lack of a better word, have lived there since the end of the last ice age, despite some of the modern bullshit like Cheddar Man and whatnot, where they give them blue eyes but dark skin, which makes zero sense. And yeah, there was definitely dark-skinned people like the Picts and so forth who existed in the British Isles. The point is, white people have been in the area of Europe since the last ice age at a minimum. So 13,000 plus years. That's a pretty reasonable claim. And every group deserves a homeland. And if you were saying, oh, well, blah, 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 white people have done all this bad stuff, well, it would actually make more sense if it was in a country like the United States or like Australia or Canada or New Zealand, that you wanted to roll back the white population. That would, perhaps you could make an intellectually sound argument for that. But in Europe, it's nonsense. And what's been happening is that this group that's coming in has not been honoring the culture or customs of those groups, have been a drain on the economics of that country by being largely and often on, government assistance, and causing a huge amount of crime, especially against women. So it went from 21% of women in 2019 supporting them to 33%. And again, this is Politico, which is left/Molochian leaning. And that's a massive increase. That's an increase of 150%, right? You'll say it's 12%, but in order to turn 21% into 33%, that means it's an 150% increase in 5 years. Meanwhile, men have gone up, 120%, right? Or 120% to go from 25% to 30. So it says 12% percentage point increase, but anyone who understands percentages in terms of like interest rates on your credit card, and you understand it correctly, knows that to go from 21% to 33% is not a gain of 12%. It's actually a gain of 150% of the principal, the 21. So that is a massive swing in the past 5 years. So also Gen Z, right? Younger millennials and Gen Z are suddenly voting for the so-called far right. I hate that term because basically it seems like if you're to the left of Joseph Stalin, suddenly you're far right nowadays. I'm someone who considered myself a leftist, or really better put, a anarcho-syndicalist for most of my life, but I tended to identify with and vote for the Democrats. And that started to change when with the rise of Barack Obama, and also just my own education about what the Clintons had done and Mena, Arkansas, all this kind of stuff. Just my education. And I'm not like here to say I have some ringing endorsement of the Republicans, but this framing by the media is so cynical, far right, that's not an accident. They're doing it because they're trying to summon up the Weimar Republic and, of course, Germany under the Third Reich. And that's what they're saying. But more French youth are also voting for the far right. And so with 18 to 24-year-olds, it showed that they're up 12% from where they were 2 years ago. And I'm not sure what an increase that is because they left the original number out. But that means that at a minimum, since I don't think they were voting very high, I doubt it was higher than women. I think it was more like 10%, which means it's doubled in just 2 years. So women and young people in France, they see the writing on the wall. The young people are losing what few jobs there are, and seeing like all the economic degradation that happens when you just flood a country with new people. And again, these aren't people coming over on the, I forget what they are, H-1B, whatever it is, special visas that we have here in the United States to bring tech-savvy people from, say, India to Silicon Valley, right? These are people who are being directed to come to Europe by George Soros and other international groups and other foreign groups that are clearly attempting to change the demographics and weaken and destroy European culture and European economics. So then switching now to the UK, a very similar thing happened where the Molochians won what it appears is an important victory, but actually, if you drill down, it's kind of a symbolic and hollow victory. And there's more on that in the second half in the Patreon with the channeling from the virtues, which was absolute fire, by the way. You can see here that the Liberal Democrat Party won about 3.5 million votes, and they got 71 seats in Parliament. Reform UK got 4 million votes, more than 500,000 more people voted for them, and they got 4 seats. What? Huh? How's the math work on that? That means that the Liberal Democrats got 18 times, I think the math is, or maybe 17, 16. Yeah, around 16 times as many seats per vote. What? That's insane. So how many seats each major party should have had, right? And so, by the way, they if you don't know, Reform UK, that's Nigel Farage's party. And again, they have a staunch anti-weaponized immigration policy, right? Because the UK is being absolutely flooded. In fact, I lifted this from Paul Joseph Watson, had this as a screen cap. You can see his little face down there in the right-hand corner. He just put something out today to where They think that the population in the UK may be underestimated by as many as 10 plus million people, and that the government statistics are clearly false and based on food consumption, that back in 2007, they thought there was about 77 million people, and the official population is about 68 million, meaning that 17 years ago, it was actually 9 million higher back then in reality than as the officially stated numbers now, which means there could very easily be 88 million people, many of whom are, again, brought in by this weaponized immigration from primarily third world countries in North Africa and the Middle East. And again, this isn't to justify or hand wave away the terrible war crimes that European powers have done in places like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, where a lot of these refugees are coming from. But two wrongs don't make a right. What we should be doing, if we want to be helping these people, is we should be helping them with infrastructure and training and like low, no interest loans to rebuild the infrastructure in those countries, to make those countries that they're fleeing from. We should do something akin to the Marshall Plan at the end of World War II, where the U.S. helped Europe rebuild. That's what we should be doing if we're actually compassionate and there isn't an ulterior motive of destruction, which is what's clearly happening. And I want to be clear that all the stuff I'm talking about with immigration is in no way saying that Black people or Muslim people are necessarily bad. They're just severely culturally different from the countries that they're emigrating to, with they're sometimes being funded and given money and paid passage to come to these countries and told, when you get there, just sign up for welfare and you'll have welfare. And in some cases, it seems they're even being primed and prepped to attack the women of those countries, in some case by pointing out war crimes and so forth and saying, here's your chance to get revenge. There's been literature around this that has been grabbed at some of these places where they're sending them out of that has Soros's fingerprints all over it. So I don't want you to take away that this is demonization of people in color or Muslims, even if there might be problems with certain cultural groups that we disagree with within their own countries. It's very, very different than bringing those problematic aspects of culture, such as the treatment of women, into other countries. And the same group that attacked those countries and profited off of it, these globalist internationalist types, is the same group that's funding them to come to Europe and now to some degree the United States in order to bring about their nasty Molochian globalist government. That's their plan. They're going to be defeated, but that's their plan. So I just want to be clear about that point. So how many seats each major party would have won in a proportional representation would have seen Labor win 219 seats, Conservatives win 154 seats, and Reform win 93 seats. In other words, going back to this earlier slide, Reform got 4 seats, and they should have got 93, over 20 times higher than what they actually got. It's just incredible. And so, the Lib Dems got 79 seats, as you can see here. So they should have got even actually slightly more than they get. Most of those extra bulk of seats went to the centrist parties, Labor and the Conservatives, which are, of course, dominated by the Molochians. In fact, Keir Starmer, you can look it up, there's clips of him where they ask, if you had to side between Davos and Westminster, who would you side with? And he, no hesitation, he says, I'd side with Davos. Bruh. And he said, because it's more complicated dealing with Westminster. I'm like, you mean the rule of law of the country you inhabit and now are the prime minister of? What the heck? And one of the first things he did was commute a bunch of sentences of prisoners, including some very notorious pedophiles have been released. Not a surprise that the Molochian vibration would be releasing those people back out into the public. So then just looking at the vote share and the change since 2019, you see that the Conservatives have gone down. The Labor's barely budged. Reform has exploded to the upside, right? They've added 12.4%, which is actually like let's see, if it was 2% to begin with. So that's a 700% increase since 2019. So again, that's a reason for hope, even if there's been shenanigans afterwards. And by reason for hope, what I mean is that you can't really go about fixing the rest of the world until you've dealt with your own house, right? And if these European countries don't immediately in the next year or two deal with this weaponized immigration problem, there won't be a Europe left to preserve, right? There won't be European culture left to preserve. And I'm adamantly opposed to any group's culture being erased from the earth through subterfuge and or violence, which is exactly what's happening. I'm also not okay with what's happening in these Muslim countries where they're being attacked, like in Syria, like in Afghanistan, like in Iraq, and the same actors are behind all of this. So the votes required to re-elect one MP for each party in the 2024 election. Reform UK got 4 million votes and got 4 MPs. What? The Workers' Party of Britain got over 200,000 votes and no MPs. The Green Party had to get 500,000-ish votes to get even one MP. And way down here at the bottom, Labour needed a mere 10,000 votes to get a Minister of Parliament. In other words, they only needed about 1%, 3% of what Reform UK needed to get a single MP. Yeah, the parliamentary system is just absolute madness. It's trash. So Labour got 34% of the vote share, but 64% of the seats share. Conservatives got 24% of the vote share, and they got shafted about 5%. Reform UK got 14% of the vote share and only 1%. They got 14-1 screwed. It's incredible. Green Party, which is, Green Party in Britain is a bit different than the Green Party in, say, Germany, where they're part of this communist thing. And that's not to say they don't have some communist sympathizers in their ranks, but they got screwed 7-1. But Reform UK got screwed twice as bad as that. It's just kind of crazy. So that's my presentation on the what happened there. And let me end the screen share. What happened there in Europe. But as I explain in the second half for the members only of Patreon, the virtues explained to me how a lot of these are just actually hollow victories. All right, so I want to move on to the next section. So the next section is fulfillment of angelic prophecies. Well, Texas doesn't tend to, the Gulf Coast, according to a friend of mine, they said that a hurricane, which Beryl was just under hurricane status, was a very severe tropical storm. They hit about once a decade or so, something like that, every few years. And shortly after that, angelic prophecy about how artificial hurricanes, no less, would be hitting Texas and Florida. Sure enough, one has already hit Texas, and that is, I'm sure, sadly not the last, because they said all these chaotic events were going to really go upwards after July 11th. And in fact, I'm just going to read a little piece from that prophecy. So in Texas, no, that's not the part I want to say. July 11th shall be an important day, and there will be world-changing historical events that shall occur, some of which shall be positive, some of which shall be negative. Not all will be reported. This will happen largely abroad. One event in particular shall happen in the United States. This shall be a good event, though it may be underreported. Look carefully in the U.S. and you will find it. And I did, and they confirmed it. And they called it the golden shoehorn. That is something being compressed into a tiny space that shall be positive and hold within it great hope. This is the event to look for. And then I said that, or rather they said through me, that artificial hurricanes shall be used among other weather weaponry. They shall be used to punish Florida and Texas. People in these states should be prepared with food, water, and medicine. Hopefully my viewers who were on the Gulf Coast prepared with food and water, because I know they were without power for many days there. So what about this thing about July 11th, right? They said it's a temporal marker, and that was their primary thing they were stating, and that after it, and the people who are in the members of the Patreon got the full prophecy, all of it. And that video is still available, and you can become a patron for free to see if it works for you. And then it's just $11 a month to have every second half of the live stream have access to it. But if you join the free Patreon, you can check it out. You can look at all the past live streams that you've thus far missed that were for members only, and kind of evaluate if it makes sense that to just $11. I mean, that's less than a coffee at your local barista a week. So, July 7th shall be an important date. There shall be world-changing events. So what are those? So a couple of things were a lead up to what ended up being like the big reveal this week, in my opinion. And I'm going to go ahead and put up one of my favorite news aggregators, but you really do need to be aware that this website has an agenda and nobody really knows who owns it, right? And that is Zero Hedge. But they've been a great news aggregator for a long, long time. And so Zelensky and Biden blast Modi's visit to Moscow and the warm embrace of Putin. And here you have Narendra Modi of India, and he's given a hug there to Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin is selling Modi oil for very, very cheap in order to get around the sanctions, because India has not agreed to the sanctions that were put into place after the invasion of Ukraine. Which, by the way, there was a very interesting esoteric reason that I was not aware of, or at least not aware of its fullness. Some of it had come through to me before by the angels, but there's a very interesting esoteric component to what's going on in Eastern Ukraine that is going to be in that second half Patreon. So they all blasted the Indian leader's visit, calling it a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace efforts. What? What are you talking about? Boris Johnson was the devastating blow to peace efforts. It's just ridiculous. And so a little bit more on that here. I'm gonna close this one, open up another one. That is a big deal. Like that is Modi in India, which is one of the biggest economies in the world, signaling they're all about this BRICS alliance. And a lot of people don't realize it. And they had a detailed joint statement. And India and Russia are strengthening their ties greatly. And they're just, this article is really worth reading. But the key axis being the Russo-Indo strategic partnership, since it prevents the American and Chinese superpowers from coming together. Russia's very smart. They're playing, India and China are rivals. And Russia is kind of like working with both of them. And they're kind of Russia's going back and forth and playing India and China off each other to some degree, while also all of them are working together against the NATO Western Alliance. And this article is well worth reading. You can go there to Zero Hedge, and there it is. You can read more about it. But this sets up the really important thing, which was the big historical event that did indeed, as prophesized, happen on the 11th. Let me pull that up. Oh my goodness. Did it somehow close? Holy smokes. Give me just a second. My apologies, folks. Classic Ian technological issues. Give me just a moment here, folks. That's why this is a esoteric and politics stream rather than a tech stream. So give me just a second. Oh, come on. This is killing me, Smalls. There it is. Because this is the big daddy thing that I want to share. It's what I think is the most important piece of news. And it came out on the 11th. There's actually 3 major things that happened on the 11th, but this is the big one. And I had to read that first part for this to kind of make extra sense. So Putin and the BRICS have announced that BRICS is going to create a parliamentary body in the future. That is huge. That is a step towards this Luciferian version of a global government, which on the surface and to some degree in reality is voluntary in nature, right? The BRICS are coming together in an alliance. You could argue that they're being forced to come together in an alliance because of what the Molochians are doing. And cynics and blackpilling folks will say, oh, this is proof that all the elites are working together, blah, blah, blah. No, this is a more horizontal power sharing agreement, both economically and also military alliance based. But having a parliament is, whoa. I mean, that is straight up a version of a global governance to some degree, to where the BRICS are going to become something somewhat similar to the EU in nature. And this, I am certain, was the big historical event that the angels were referring to, because this is going to happen. This is setting the ball rolling on this. And this is huge, because this is talking about a level of integration and coordination that's way beyond what the BRICS have done thus far, particularly politically. Now, on a related note, on things that have been happening on the big stage here, another thing that's been a little underreported, as in people aren't really realizing the gravity of this, is what's happening in China's banking system. Now, this has been going on for a while with Evergrande collapsing, their gigantic real estate investment, but they had 40 banks vanish overnight. And this happened actually on the 11th, right? 2 days ago. Well, that says 10/7. I'm not sure why it says that. But a lot of this unfolded on the 11th from the Chinese point of view because they're a day ahead of the United States. And so, yeah, there is a collapse that is happening in China in their banking sector, and that it has a lot to do with commercial real estate and over-indebted developers and the issue of hidden bad debts. Boy, does that sound familiar. So this is going to be devastating, absolutely devastating to the Chinese economy. And of course, as goes China or the US, so goes the world. This is going to lead to further bank collapses outside of China. And this is a very big deal, and people haven't really come to grips with the enormity of this yet. So China, wanting to distract from that, did something quite nasty and dangerous and brinksmanship in order to distract their population from their own banking woes. And this also happened on the 11th. And that is that China sent a record number of warplanes near Taiwan, which, NATO in its hypocrisy, said, oh, this is incredible escalation, blah, blah, blah. Like, come on, get out of here, NATO. Among those 66, some 56 of the aircraft crossed over the median line, and Taiwan scrambled aircraft and put missile systems on high alert in response to the PLA incursions. This is a big deal, and this is very dangerous. And this, too, is alluded to in the angelic prophecy that's in the Patreon in the second half, and how I will just go ahead and say this part here in the front half. There are rumblings behind closed doors of many of the NATO powers saying, what do we have to do with the Pacific theater? Sure, that impacts the U.S., but we don't really care about that. This isn't like Ukraine, which is right on our doorstep. This is way across the world. How much do we really care about Taiwan? And that's because, in part, China has made deep penetration into European politics, much the way it has in the U.S., but it's also because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to try and sell that to domestic people who are dealing with this weaponized immigration and all the various political and economic problems that Europe is facing, and they're having to pony up more cash for what's going on in Ukraine, which does directly impact them both through Ukrainian grain exports and also through the potential that this war could embroil Eastern Europe and maybe even the EU directly. And so apparently, according to the angels, there are behind the scenes efforts by, in particular, European members of NATO to put the kibosh on any sort of intervention with China and Taiwan. And China may very well be aware of this based on what they did here, although this could just be, a wag the dog maneuver to keep the Chinese population from getting super upset about the banking sector collapse. And then, let's see, I need to real quick check my notes here. All right. All right. So then we're going to have, we're going to hit that in the second half. So I'll close that. So the golden shoehorn, what happened on July 11th? That was perhaps a good thing, right? So it reads, this is what the prophecy says. One of what, not all will be reported, this shall happen largely abroad. One event in particular shall happen in the United States. This shall be a good event, though it may be underreported. Look carefully in the U.S. and you will find it. The golden shoehorn, that is something being compressed into a tiny space that shall be positive and hold within it great hope. This one is just a bit like, even for me. And I, of course, have this all the time. These experiences, the angels share things with me or protect me or whatever, and it's still, it's humbling. It's humbling, this stuff happening. So I'm convinced it was Orban continuing his Ukraine peace mission with the Trump meeting, and him saying that Trump is the man of peace. So he believes that a second Trump presidency will boost chances for achieving peace in Ukraine. And Viktor Orban, who is vilified in the globalist media, right, as he's some kind of fascist just because he hasn't gone along with this weaponized immigration from the get-go. Within the past 2 weeks, he's met with the presidents Putin, Xi Jinping, and before that, Zelensky in Kiev. He's actually trying to broker real peace. And you notice this room has all sorts of gold in it, right? And Viktor Orban has been under tremendous pressure for decades. And the angels actually talk about him as well in the second half prophecy. He said, it was an honor to visit President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago today. We discussed ways to make peace. The good news of the day, he's going to solve it. And so the angels confirmed it, but I almost didn't need their confirmation, because look at this picture. It's the confirmation right here. Look at that. Viktor Orban with golden, what look like angel wings. It's actually an eagle behind him. It's actually this eagle that holds, I think, a copy of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, more likely, right? But it looks like golden angel wings behind him. So I'm convinced this is the golden shoehorn, something being compressed into a tiny space that carries with it great hope and peace. And so there it is. That is the first half for the public, and you can go to my Patreon. Go to Patreon, White Lotus of Light, and that will be, I believe there's a link down below the description of this video. And there you can sign up for a free membership to Patreon, and you will be able to see the second half for free, and you'll be able to see any prior live streams that were for members only. You can also see that for free with a free trial, and then you can evaluate, does it make sense for you, if you enjoy the content here, to give $11 a month. That's slightly less than $3 a week. That's less than a cup of coffee a week, and you can get all kinds of stuff. We're going to be talking about the Supreme Court and strange rulings recently impacting the shadow wars. We're going to talk about what the Department of Justice is doing domestically in the U.S. To seemingly cause an impact in the election. And then Virtues Channeled Prophecy, and there'll be Q&A in the second half. And so I hope you enjoyed it. And if you feel the call and you want to have transformation in your life from the angels, helping you overcoming self-limiting beliefs for miraculous results, and I am living proof of that. And a lot of my students comment often in the chats about how it's been a life-changing experience. You can have miraculous change in your life. You can attract abundance. You can attract career success. You can get clarity on your life purpose. You can get clarity on how to help family members. There can be healing. You can overcome trauma. You can dissolve self-limiting beliefs and step into your God-given and sacred gifts so that you can shine into the world what you were meant to do, which is going to be very different than what it was for me. But you can have that kind of miraculous transformation, and I am offering it on a sliding scale. If you're struggling right now, talk to me, send me an email, whitelotusoflight.com. Send me an email and tell me what's going on for you, and we will work with you. We can do installments, or if you just need a lower price altogether, we can do that. And the same thing applies for, we're in the middle of the first ever Introduction to Vedic Astrology class, where you can learn about your karmas. You can learn about how your life will unfold, about how the lives of your loved ones will unfold, and get that clarity. Why I do what I do today is because I am a Vedic astrologer, and I looked at my chart, and in 2020, I took a leap of faith, and I quit my job in social work in order to pursue what I'm doing now, because I saw in my chart that it would be supported, and boy, has it been supported. And then working with the angels helped me get over all the self-limiting beliefs that were really holding me back. So if you're interested in either of those, just write me on whitelotusoflight.com. If you're interested in the angelic prophecy in the second half for members only, you can go over to Patreon and sign up for free. Get all the past ones, including the angelic prophecy that was given out about 2 weeks ago. You get today's angelic prophecy, and you can evaluate, does it make sense to continue to support this channel? Thank you so much. Much love, everyone, and I will see you in the members only chat. Take care. See you soon. It'll be at 10 or 15 minutes we start that. All right. Bye-bye.